All right, we are live with another episode, an in-person episode of the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. This will be the third one that we've recorded, Sean LeBlanc, Ryan Corcoran being the other two. And yeah, I think the response to the in-person podcasts have been much better. So I want to try to do more of them as a percentage of the podcast that we release on the feed here. But in this episode, I wanted to chat with Justin Dragone, who is actually our acquisitions manager at Aligned Real Estate Partners. And we're going to get into, fun stuff that's tactical for everybody, which is how we find deals and how you can find deals and go direct to seller and all that fun stuff. But let's start with your backstory. How did you get into the real estate business? Like, how did you get into this whole world? And then, I'm sure we'll naturally progress to how you and I started working together.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming, I think. So happy to be here.
Overdue. Yeah.
Yeah. So my background is, and I'll start way back from the start. Call it 2015, I was a sophomore in high school, and that's when my real estate journey really started out. So I, like other people, was kind of hooked on HGTV, flipping houses shows, and I would see
Flip or Flop.
Yep,
Tarek El Moussa.
Yep, that was a good one. And it seemed so easy, and they would make so much money. So obviously I was just like, wow, could be something here. So I pretty much, right after that, walked down to a brokerage that was in my town at the time. I walked in, I said, hey, do you guys need any help? Anything I can do? Just want to learn. So,
and this is Northern Massachusetts.
Yep.
for the audience.
Yep. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll give you a shot. And it wasn't the most glamorous work. I was putting out open house signs and the little door hangs for new listings around the entire neighborhood. It was kind of the grunt work that no one else wanted to do, but it was great experience, and he taught me a lot. So fast forward to college, went to University of New Hampshire, and kind of took a hiatus from the real estate journey. I did get my license in college, didn't do much with it at the time because I knew I wanted to do something with it after college, but just not the time. So then when I graduated, I started out at a large commercial brokerage out of Boston, which was an interesting experience to say the least. It
started at Boiler Room?
Yeah. It was 100 cold calls a day, just nonstop, and that was it. So didn't love that. It was suit and tie every day, 12-hour days, and it got draining very quickly. And I quickly also realized that I wanted to be the person on the other side of the phone. I wanted people to call me. I wanted to be the owner, the operator, the investor. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting there one day, and how I got connected with you is we had a professor at UNH who you had as well, and she would speak very highly of you, how you own this real estate portfolio. So connected with you on LinkedIn, and I was sitting there one day, saw your post on LinkedIn looking for someone to do acquisitions, and I was like, this is exactly what I do right now, but it's more on the other side of things and will get me to where I want to be, which is eventually ownership. So reached out to you, we had a good conversation, and now I've been with you 3 years now, just finding deals, and it's been great. So that's my spiel.
That's the spiel. But I think you probably have maybe not probably, but I wonder how many people go into Marcus and Millichap and go through that rigorous training process and then get spit out the other side. It seems like it works for them in that it very quickly filters who's right for that role and who's right for that business.
Yeah.
And if, the tough part is I think it probably turns a lot of people off of real estate, would be my guess. Mm-hmm. A lot of people get into real estate thinking the only way in is to be a broker, call it.
Yeah.
And then they go through the rigorous training process of an M&M or any other brokerage. I mean, I'm sure a lot of brokerages have similar training programs. And then they lose their desire to be in the real estate business. Yeah. I don't know. That's almost just a statement I'm making without even knowing. But did you feel like that was the case with people that were kind of in your contemporaries at that time going through the program?
For sure. So when I started, there were probably about 6 of us in that class, call it, that started out right in the summer.
Yep.
And I think I was the one that made it the longest. Everyone dropped out before me. It was just such a very corporate environment, and you had no freedom to do anything. You couldn't get creative, which I hated. You were stuck. You could only get listings. And today's world, it's hard to get listings now. Things happen off market, and that's just how it works.
And it seems as if, well, I mean, I think the other challenging part of being a broker too is there's an incongruency oftentimes with like the corporate atmosphere of a Marcus and Millichap, like the suit and tie kind of stuffy.
Yeah.
Stuffy is maybe not the best word, but like, you know, I'll use it, stuffy environment of like you're going out here and you're an extremely professional individual and that's how you're going to interact with the marketplace, which actually is not really how real estate is as an industry.
Yep.
You know, maybe in the institutional world where you're selling 250 unit Class A buildings in Boston for $100 million, where you're dealing with, you know, pension funds and massive institutional owners. But like the vast majority of real estate, and certainly what we do, is a very casual business in terms of like developing relationships, presenting yourself, how you interact with folks. Like you know, you actually kind of tell on yourself a little bit if you're an extremely like straight backed, like professional individual walking into these rooms and speaking with owners and the other vendors and even LPs oftentimes. Is that something that you've noticed in like working on the acquisition side for like more so like within an organization, actually going out and speaking with sellers and brokers and everything like that? Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think in the middle markets, call it, or the markets that we play in, kind of $1 to $20 million.
Yep.
All of those owners, they're just normal guys. Like if we showed up to meet a seller and we were wearing suit and ties,
we would lose the deal.
Yeah,
and that has actually happened.
That has happened. Yeah. We won the deal because we were not wearing the suit and ties and we were just normal and had a normal conversation. So with all these people that we meet, they're on the older side or mom and pop. They're just normal guys that have a couple buildings, and
100%.
And we're relatable, and I think that's what wins deals for us.
Yeah, and I think that the folks who do the best job going direct to seller go direct to seller with the objective of like being friendly and building a relationship with an individual on the other side of it, not company to company. It's more person to person to very loosely describe it. That said, I'm sure you learned some things at Marcus and Millichap, making 100 cold calls a day and working through that. Like, what were some of the takeaways? What were some of the good experiences, I would say, maybe is the better way to ask that question. Like when you look back, that 6+ months there, very rigorous. What were some things that you're still, using today more or less from that training?
Yeah. So, they teach you every aspect of commercial real estate.
Yep.
So that was super helpful. But on top of that, just the sales experience was the most valuable thing. They teach you how to talk to people, how to make these cold calls and how to continue the conversation and build relationships. This business is 100% relationship orientated and it's a long game, and they really hammered that in. Yeah. So they teach you how to talk to them and how to stay in touch with them and just continue developing that relationship, which that has stuck with me very much because that's obviously what we do every single day now. So and now we'll just transition to what we do now. I mean, and as you mentioned, it's been 3 years since we've started working together. I think it was March of 23, I believe. Yep. So a little over that. And I think what we've done over the years has slightly evolved in terms of like going direct to seller. Maybe some of like the mail pieces and maybe some of the messaging, but like a lot of the fundamentals are still more or less the same of how we're getting in front of sellers and speaking with sellers. Yeah. At a high level, we'll just start kind of broad. Like, what do we do as a business to get in front of owners and to increase or basically grow our pipeline of call it off-market direct-to-seller deals? What are some of the high-level things that we're doing and what you're working on? Yeah, so like the whole start of it is it takes time for sure. the first, when I started in March. It's not fun for a podcast, but it is true. It does take time. It's a fact. So I started in March. We didn't close a deal until September, maybe, I want to say. It was late. It was Kelly Street, late August, I think. Yeah. But more or less 6 months, whatever that is. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, what I do to build that pipeline is there's many points of contact that we hit with a seller. So it starts off with a cold call. Obviously, you want to try to get on the phone with them. That's the best way to have a conversation, in my opinion. If they don't answer, you leave a voicemail, you say who you are, and you try to be very relatable. In this case, I say, we're in the area, we own this many units around your property, and that gets them interested and hopefully gets a call back. Then I send them a text saying something similar to what I just said in the voicemail. Then I send an email also saying something similar. And then on top of that, we send a direct mail. So there's really 5 points of contact that gets them familiar with who we are and what we do. So the first 12 months that you get in the business is just doing that every single day to everyone in your market and just talking to as many owners and brokers as you can. That is the best way to build your pipeline.
How often do we do this stuff, right? So let's say, you get the data list, and I've talked ad nauseum on the podcast about where to find a data. Like we use Reonomy, right? There's any number of different data platforms to get a data list.
Yep.
Go listen to our other podcast episodes to figure that out. But you have a data list. You are going to go call the owners. You're going to text the owners. You're going to email them. You're going to send them a mail piece, and you're going to do everything you can to get in front of them. So let's say you've got a list of 250 owners, right? You can maybe work through that list in a few weeks, couple of weeks. If you're calling them, if you send a round of mail, something like that. What do you do after that, right? So like maybe you had a couple conversations with some owners and you put them in a CRM type of thing. But like, how long do you wait before you do it again? Like, any tips on going back and working through that list? Like, how do you think about working through what is a defined number of owners really that you can reach out to, and could be big depending on how big your market is, could be small if you're in a smaller market. You do all of this, like how do you go back and revisit it? Like what are some general comments around that?
Yeah, so a list of, call it 250-ish properties would probably take me about a month to go through. And some people might say that's longer than normal, but I like to really get prepared for each call. So I want to know who I'm talking to, and I want to have their entire portfolio open at the same time. I want to know what they bought it for, what else they own, and pretty much everything about the deal. So you sound much more knowledgeable coming off. And that's something that I learned at Marcus as well, is you want to be as prepared, not too prepared, because you want to spend an hour preparing. You want to take 5-10 minutes to just brief overview of their portfolio and all the key details. So I would say it takes about a month to go through all those contacts. And then from there, I probably wait about 2 months to circle back through, because you don't want to call them a month after and say you talk to some guy and he said he doesn't want to sell. A month later, it's probably going to be the same answer. Even a year later, it's probably going to be the same answer.
Yeah.
But you don't want to, blow the guy up every day and just piss him off. But you want to just lightly touch base every couple months and just check in, and that's the best way to develop that relationship.
Yeah. So you wait a couple of months. We send direct mail quarterly, and I think technically we send it bi-monthly depending on the list, but like very broadly speaking, like we typically send direct mail quarterly. And if you send it any more than that, you're just kind of wasting dollars, because again, specific to multifamily, where you have a smaller list than you do if you're somebody out there flipping single family homes or marketing to, folks who own condos and single families and 2 to 4 units and stuff like that, you're going to have a bigger list. You could probably send more mail. And that's typically going to be a much more reactive sale for that owner, because they face some like real mitigating distress. Whereas multifamily, it's more relationship development, and you should prioritize maybe mailing less frequently, but spending time trying to contact them in the other ways, and giving them some space to breathe between how often you chat with them. But so let's say you get, you have a couple conversations on that first round of outreach. You've got your 5-10 sellers who either called you from your mail piece, or they picked up a cold call, or they, texted you back. What does the process look like from there in terms of like, obviously our goal is we want to buy their property. A lot of things have to happen between, hey, I got your mail piece, like, what are you going to offer me, and buying a property. So walk me through the approach with a lead in terms of like, where does that start? What do you ask for? How does that conversation typically go? And how do you think about trying to get to the finish line with them? Yeah.
I mean, the goal of every single conversation you have with the seller is you want to just make them an offer.
Yeah.
Ideally, they're interested in actually selling, but even if they're not, we like to still make them an offer anyways, because it shows that we're legitimate, and when they're ready, they'll reach out to us. So going into that, the call, you want to gather all the information you need to make an accurate offer. And in our space, multifamily, call it 5 to 100 unit buildings, the real key pieces of information is, I'd say, the unit mix, the bed and bath count of each unit. That's probably number one in my opinion, because that dictates what the rents are going to be. Number 2 is the in-place rents, because we need to know if it's going to be financeable. We need to know if there are leases in place or they're just tenant at will. And then you want to know all the major things about the building: age of the roof, age of the heating systems. You want to know how many parking spots there are. Is there laundry? Condition of the units. Did you just renovate them? You basically want to gather as much information as you can. And if the seller is willing to talk to you, I will talk to them as long as they let me. I ask them as many questions as I can. But if you have a seller who is kind of a hard ass and he just wants you to get off the phone, then I just say, hey man, I just need the unit mix. I need to know who pays utilities and what the rents are. Just really the top ones that we need.
Which can often be done like from memory if it's a smaller building for a seller too. Like they can be like, I don't know, they're all like one beds and all the rents are like $1,200 or something.
Yep.
But I mean, that is the bare bones because, and I think part of why that's the bare bones for us, and I think that there's probably going to be people listening who are like, well, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable making an offer with just that information. I would want to know what their heating bills are and what their, what exactly has been renovated and, how much parking there is. And like the big thing that people always ask is like, I need to know their expenses. And for us, it matters a little less because one, our expenses are going to be different than theirs depending on how we run the building. And whatever they tell you anyway is going to be BS.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
And you can include that in your purchase and sale agreement that you send over, your LOI if you're sending an LOI. But early on, like you should have the confidence in understanding what the expenses are going to be. And if you don't, then this is admittedly going to be a harder process. Like we feel comfortable with that. And this is for everybody listening because we do a lot of deals in a very small geographic area within one state. And we just know what the heating bills are going to be and what the water sewer is going to be and what our insurance is going to be and all that stuff. So we don't need that from a seller because we're going to model it differently than whatever they give us anyways. And I would recommend to the folks listening, if you're going to start going direct to seller, but you don't feel comfortable with that stuff, like you should get comfortable with that before you start investing time because those are going to be really hard pieces of information to get out of a seller. And I'm sure you would agree with that in your experience. Like most don't know or they're just not going to invest that amount of time in having that level of a conversation with you. But let's talk about, so they give you the rent roll, you got some information on the units, you got maybe some context on CapEx, we arrive at an offer. How do we present the offer? How do we like start the process of like, we don't know if we have no idea what the seller wants. Oftentimes they don't even give you a price. Just send me a number. And like, we have to kind of do our best to like create some type of formalized process out of like thin air, which is challenging.
Yeah.
But like, we've arrived at like, we can give this guy, $800,000, $1 million. Like we arrive at our price. Where do we go from there? How do we present it? Like, what does our process look like?
So I would say the best thing to do is it's really dependent on the situation. If I know some guy really likes to text or really likes to email or rather the call, then I will reach out to him that way and tell him what our number is. But ideally, I want to pick up the phone. I want to have a conversation with the guy so I can explain myself on how we came up with that number. So I'll give him a call, and basically how that call just goes is, hey, we looked at the underwriting. I talked to my partner. We looked at comps, and we would have to be around $800,000. Is this something that you would consider? And then depending on their answer, if they say, maybe, yes, send the offer over, then from there, I'll write up an actual contract, an actual purchase and sale agreement, and I'll send it over to their email so they can have something in hand to review to show that it's legitimate. So that's pretty much how the process works. I don't like to overcomplicate it. Mm-hmm. If they are not interested in the offer in any way, I always try to get a counter out of them. Because, say we offered 800, they could be at 825, but they still just said no. Yeah. So I want to know if we're at 800, are they at 1.2? Because at that point, I don't want to waste my time.
Yeah.
And I just want to move on. So,
and I think that's the nuanced part of the process that does get tricky is you're dealing with a wide range of counterparties who have a wide range of levels of motivation. Like when you're talking with a broker, it's like the guy's trying to sell his property, he hired a broker. We know he wants to sell the property, right? Like, and usually there's some type of asking price assigned to it. Sometimes, unpriced, which is always the most annoying thing ever when a broker takes out a deal unpriced. Yeah. But like, this seller is a seller. Oftentimes in the direct to seller side, you get a guy who just wants to talk to someone who is interested in what you're going to offer because he kind of wants to know like what people think his building's worth, but he's not really motivated to sell. Or sometimes you have a guy who actually is really looking to sell and he's down to sell. And those are just very different, like, situations to manage. So you kind of have to take more or less a consistent process across the board and do your best, which I think is, what we try to do within the business. Yeah. And I should have asked, this maybe a few questions ago, but like in those early conversations with the seller, like what are some signals like, all right, this might actually be a seller. This is someone who has some level of motivation. This is someone who I'm not wasting my time talking to. And specifically, I'm going to make that question even more specific, like in regards to their like attitude, like approach to the conversation, stuff like that. Because we know, like, we like the buildings with the low rents that are distressed.
Yeah.
Like we kind of know that the long-term owners, like we talk about that on the podcast a lot, but like specific to, I'm on the phone with this guy and he's saying this thing, or he's approaching the conversation in this way, and therefore I'm kind of getting the sense that this is going to maybe be someone who's going to engage with us. Like, what are some things that stick out?
So a lot of times, I think we looked at this, but over the past couple of years, there was a certain number of our deals that the sellers were over a certain amount of age, I want to say.
Yeah.
And, that's just means that they all are kind of retiring, just getting out of the business. That's mostly what we encounter.
Yep.
Either they've owned the building for 30 years and they're just done with it. They want to get rid of it. That happens a lot. So it's either that. When they say that, I know for sure that they're a seller. They want to be done, or if they have a partner that they have an issue with and they are dissolving the partnership, that's also a good sign as well. But I think that the number one thing is when someone tells me, call it 75, 80 years old, I'm looking to move down south and I need to get rid of this. That's almost a clear sign that they are a legitimate seller.
Yeah. What about conversationally, like willingness to volunteer information, tone of like anything outside of like age, maybe like literally in terms of like you're on the phone with them and you're like, oh, I'm starting to get the sense that this might be someone who's looking to sell. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the easy thing is like if they're willing to talk for a while, I mean, that tells you something, but
That's what I was going to say. If they're willing to talk for a very long time and share a bunch of information to answer all the questions I have, I know that they're serious about selling. Yeah. Whereas if I have a conversation with some guy and he gives me literally nothing, maybe I just call him and he says, yeah, the gross rents are, $100K.
Yeah. And you're like, all right, well.
I'm like, okay, that really gets me nowhere. And I know you're not serious about selling, but I'll still make you an offer and maybe in a year you want to sell.
Yeah, exactly. How do you think about follow-up? So, and when I say follow-up, I mean, you've had a conversation, you made an offer, the guy's got a 10 unit and we offer $1 million and he wants 1.5 and we're not close, right? Or he wants 1.4 but like he had the other signifiers of someone who, he's older and, maybe the building itself is something that we really like. The rents are low. It kind of fits our story of what we're looking for. But he doesn't accept the offer. He makes a counter. We're just not close. And kind of fizzles out and we leave it there. Like, how do you think about staying in touch with that owner? Like, frequency of follow-up, systems that we use. Like, how do you go from there to try to keep that guy kind of in the sphere?
Yeah, that's a frustrating situation. It happens a lot because, I talk to a lot of guys who are sellers, but they just are not educated in what the actual value of their building is worth. Yeah. A lot of times they're this mom and pop owner who sees this 5-unit down the street that sold for this price, call it $200,000 a door.
Yep.
And we offered around $150 a door, and that's really the fair market value. It's extremely hard to get them to understand that, and you have to educate them in a very nice way without making them
delicate way.
Yeah, because they just don't know anything about that deal that sold. They don't know where the rents are at. They don't know the condition of the units. They just automatically assume that theirs is worth this price. So getting them down to reality is an extremely hard thing to do, and sometimes it just takes a lot of time. And sometimes that doesn't work, and then they list it with the broker who says, oh yeah, I can get you that price, just because they want the listing.
Yep.
And then 6 months later, it's still on the market and it didn't sell.
Yeah, or worse, they sell it for what we offered for 6 months
That's
earlier,
even
and then
more
they pay
frustrating,
they pay a commission, which has happened. I want to get real in the weeds here, and this is like the real tactical stuff. But when you're delicately trying to educate the seller, like, yes, Joe, I know that you have a 5-unit on Granite Street, and there's another 5-unit on Granite Street that sold for $1 million, but yours has these low rents and these like rough units. Like, how do you? It's hard. It's a hard question to answer. But like, how do you communicate that in a delicate way? Like, do you have a framework of doing that doesn't offend a seller, but like gently informs them of what the reality might be? Because that is like the hardest part of this, as you mentioned. How do you like actually tactically try to do that when you're speaking with a seller?
Yeah, so in those situations, and you taught me this, obviously, it's better to just give them as much information and insight onto what we're doing and our business plan as possible. So I like to say, these were all renovated. The rents were at this number. Your units are not nice. The rents are half that price. We're going to need to come in there, spend, call it $15,000, $20,000 per unit, redo the roof, spend a couple months leasing the units and getting the whole building stabilized. And you just need to get them to understand the time, energy, and money it takes to get to that quality. And I think just, sending me an email or doing it over the phone, I think an email is better so they can fully digest it and just completely outline your entire business plan and show them what you're going to do. So it doesn't just seem like, oh, we're trying to get this property we're trying to get this from you at a discount, because that's really not the case. There's a lot of logic that goes into all of our offers and our prices. Yeah,
and I think, to add to that, and you just, touched on it, but it's the general concept being like you have to provide them with like inarguable data.
Yes.
It's like these are the numbers, and you can't, there's no judgment around it. They're just the numbers. The numbers are, this property has granite countertops and LVP flooring and rents for $2,000 a unit. Mm-hmm. And the numbers are, your property is in need of significant construction. The rents are this, and there's this big gap between these two things that's not up for debate. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Or this property has 15 off-street parking spots and your property has none. Like those are just factual statements. And it's like, I think the education has to come in the, not like the less of an opinion-based commentary you have on it, like the better, right? It's like the more factual, and you're just sharing factual information. And then in our business, we spend $20,000 on an apartment renovation, and we use, great crews that give us economical pricing. And that's what we have to spend in your apartment to get it to the apartment that's sold for $20,000 more a unit.
Yeah.
So, that's more for the listeners out there. It's like, you have to get away from like, no, your property is worth less because, the rents are lower and the units aren't as nice. Well, that may be true, but like you could still kind of argue that. You have to get into like the data-oriented nature of like sharing the factual information. Yeah. All right. So how have things evolved over the last few years? I know, as we talked about kind of at the top of the show here, we haven't really changed the fundamentals of how we approach all of this stuff, but we've changed some little stuff around the edges, some direct mail stuff, some messaging. In your mind, is there anything that sticks out like March of 2023 when you started versus April of 2026 when we're recording this as like big changes in our approach, or, kind of thematic changes in our approach that stick out?
I think our approach for the most part has stayed fairly consistent. I will say when I started coming right out of Marcus, I was still very much in that professional corporate way, which you kind of quickly turned me to the other side of that, which is good. So I think it took me a while because I was a little bit uncomfortable, but I slowly became more and more casual. And now it's, when I call someone, it's a super casual conversation and not salesy whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way. So in terms of our approach, that's probably what has changed a bit, but it's stayed pretty consistent over time. I think more so the types of owners and sellers have changed. And I know you've touched on this before, but the age of mom and pop is on the decline for sure, just given how much content is out there. And now there's these younger guys owning properties who are sophisticated or think they're sophisticated, and it's much harder to get deals done. But I think that's the bigger change that we've seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and when you say kind of like the age of the mom and pop, I'm just clarifying, like, maybe not the physical age of the owner, or the physical age, the actual age of the owner, but like just the, kind of the time that we're in, where that is frankly where we get most of our deals done, is those types of owners. Like we're moving past a period of time where those make up a significant portion of the ownership base, whatever that number might be. It's just a declining percentage of the ownership base. Would you say it's harder, easier to find deals today? This is almost like within our business, but also kind of like a market question of the market in early mid 2026 versus early mid 2023. Would you say easier for us to find deals, or getting more offers accepted, or harder, or same, or what'd you take there?
It's really hard to tell because the market's very interesting right now.
Yeah.
I think we certainly stand out in our market, just given our track record, and people know that we can execute in our market.
Yep.
But there's this overlying thing that's going on right now with I've talked to you about this and we've talked about this multiple times, but what's going on with Mass, with rent control and everything.
Yeah.
All the Boston-based investors are getting skittish and coming to Southern New Hampshire. And sometimes they're outbidding us because they're overpaying for things because they can buy stuff at a slightly better cap rate than Boston. And that's where it's hard. But at the end of the day, when someone brings us a deal, they know that we can get it done and we can execute in a straightforward way, not complicated. And I think that's still what gives us the advantage in our market.
Yeah, I think it's tough. And you hit the nail on the head. It's like we have these overarching macro trends throughout, call it the United States, of interest rates being higher and predominantly speaking, rent's not growing as much. I mean, rents haven't grown in New Hampshire in almost like a couple of years now. Like we're basically leasing apartments where we were in 2024.
Yeah.
Like still, that's what's happening. We haven't seen like a major rebound there. But then we have all this tailwind specific to like micro locally New Hampshire with the mass rent control dynamics and like New Hampshire being a growing market and being the only quote unquote like landlord friendly state in all of New England, basically, just speaking very broadly. So it's kind of like hard. It's like we have the pendulum swinging in one direction, but then we have like these competing forces that are swinging it back in the other direction. And like the market fundamentally hasn't like changed significantly in terms of like prices or cap rates or whatever. It's just like the market's kind of just been the market for a while. And as soon as we think it's going to go in one direction or the other, like really the last half of 2025, we've talked a little bit about this, but like it seemed like the market was really going to soften up because like rents were like struggling the last half of 2025. Yeah. Like we were leasing units like 4, 5, 6% below the last lease, and like we were just like we just got to get units filled, and that was from September really to like September 25 to like February 26. But at the same time, it's like Mass puts this whole rent control thing on the ballot, and then we have the tailwind of this capital that's kind of keeping values higher. So it's a very weird market to operate in. And maybe the better question that I'll ask is how, like, do you feel like you're competing with more people marketing direct to seller now than 3 years ago? Like, in terms of like how we find deals, do you think it's harder or easier, like when, you know, just sending mail, making cold calls, et cetera? Like, do you think you're competing with more like individuals kind of doing what we do, or still pretty similar in terms of the landscape?
100%. Definitely more people doing what we're doing. Sometimes I talk to sellers and they have a stack of letters that they get in the mail. But they always say that our letter is the best, and, you know, we have the most credibility. We actually own the market. It's a nicely written letter, has, you know, your face on it, and that's why they call us. But definitely more competition for sure. So I think it's more important now than ever to really to stand out and make sure that you can execute on a deal. So that's something that's really important with us is we can get, if someone brings us a deal, we can get them a contract the same day with minimal information.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah, and these guys that are sending these letters and marketing to these sellers, they just can't do that. They're going to want to see the property. They're going to want to get the expenses, like you said. They're going to want all this information. Well, we already know what the number is, and we have the contract in their inbox. Yep. So that gives us the advantage with all this competition as well.
100%. Yeah, and it's a good point. And I think it's hard to get to that place. The only way you get to that place is, I mean, one, like even outside of feeling confident in the offer you're making and in your underwriting and all of that, like you just have to be like really, you gotta have your shit together. Like you gotta be like ready to go. And a lot of investors are too scattered. They're too kind of all over the place. They don't realize that like speed to conversation and speed to engaging someone who's like fits the perfect story, because they have like a handful of letters, they're calling multiple people. Like, you got to be quick. So a lot of people just who even are doing the direct to seller stuff, like they're maybe not getting the results they want because the guy calls them, you know, on Monday afternoon and they call him back Tuesday night because of whatever reason. But then we're sending them a contract the same day, and we're like, even if they're not signing that contract, like they're already like invested in a conversation with us. And they feel like that train is pretty far down the tracks. Yeah. It's tough to like start over with somebody else if they truly have that motivation to sell. So this is kind of an out of left field question, but like I think it'll be interesting. What about, call it like working in acquisitions? I mean, that's a very broad way to describe it, but like going direct to seller, trying to build these relationships with sellers and brokers has like surprised you, or has been like not what you expected, I guess, like when you started? Like, I'm sure you had an idea of what you would be doing on a day-to-day basis when you started, and then like you've now been doing it for a number of years. Like, what is kind of a reality of your day-to-day that's like different, or that's just kind of not what you expected when you started?
Something that's not what I expected probably is like I mentioned, the time that it takes to get all these deals done. Sometimes it can be very quick, but most of the times it's a multi-year process of talking to a seller, which, I've heard that before, but I didn't really understand it till I saw it firsthand and actually dealt with it. Where, you talk to a seller year one and they're kind of interested in selling, but it still takes multiple follow-ups per year, and then it can be a couple years of that to then get a deal done. So that was something that was a little bit unexpected. Going into it, I was like, we're going to go out and buy some real estate. We're the end buyer. I'd figured, just make a bunch of offers and buy a bunch of deals, but it's not the case.
If only it were that easy.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
But then again, if it was that easy, then we would be competing with way more people. So it's like, it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, I mean, like the big Barrington deal, like the 72 unit in Barrington, like even before you joined, I was sending that guy mail. Like I sent him mail 5 years ago, and I wasn't doing it as consistently back then, and he wasn't a seller back then, but he was putting them all away, and then like just kept sending him mail after, you joined the business. And even just from when he first contacted Aligned and gave you a call, like there was a long period of time between when that conversation occurred and making some offers and them not taking it, and periods of follow-up, and then making some more offers and they didn't take it, and a period of follow-up, so finally getting a contract signed. Like that was, if we include just when I first started sending a mail, it was a 5-year process. But it was a $15 million deal, right? So it's a bigger deal, and that's just kind of what has to happen.
And we had to go up there and sit down with them in person and get them to trust us.
And put together a whole presentation for them. But it'd be interesting. I think if we were to like analyze a lot of the deals we've done, regardless of size, right? It's they reach out, we make offer too low, some back and forth, okay, follow up, triggering event that actually causes them to meet our number, or where maybe the market's changed a little bit and we're able to offer a little bit more. But that's always going to be the process, which is why the critical components of the whole process is staying around the hoop, so to speak, and maintaining your presence of being top of mind. What do we do outside of just following up one-to-one with a seller through our CRM that allows us to stay a little bit more omnipresent, top of mind, in front of a seller, that we just kind of, I guess, in terms of what we do in a more scalable fashion, that's not like, hey, Joe, like checking in, because we do some other stuff as well.
I'd probably say the monthly acquisitions newsletter that we send. So I have everyone that I talk to, whether they're sellers, brokers, insurance agents, lenders, and we basically just have a massive list of those people in our market, and we send a monthly newsletter to them saying this is what's going on, this is what we're seeing in the market, and then at the end we just have a little, we're still looking to buy, let us know if you know anyone selling, pay your referral fee, stuff like that. So it's actual useful information that keeps us top of mind. And at the end of the day, it's like you just want your face and name in front of people regularly, so that, because so much of this is like Joe with his 10-unit building is not going to be a seller in March because, whatever, he doesn't have that triggering event. And then he finds out in July, he just assumed his kid was going to take it over when he didn't want to run the property management company or passed away or whatever. And his kid's like, I want nothing to do with that. And then he's like, oh, shoot, well, now I got to figure out what to do. And next thing you know, he's going through an eviction in November, and he's like, my kid doesn't want this. It's a pain in the ass to run. Like, now I'm actually a real seller, and I've been getting these newsletters and getting some direct mail pieces like, hey, what do you guys, I'm ready to go. And that's just so much of what you're trying to solve for, which is not, it doesn't make, there's no like special tip on a podcast other than like, it's just patience, which doesn't make for a good episode. But it is what it is. It's the reality of the situation. All right, so what do we got to talk about AI, because I talk about it every single episode, because it's just everything is changing as a result of all of the tools that come out on a weekly basis. Like 1 to 2 like big high level use cases where you're using it on a very regular basis on the acquisition side and on the underwriting side of the business that somebody can easily implement in their business that's listening. I would say that Claude this is what we use in our business, and that is by far the most impressive AI, I'd say, out of all of them. It's best for kind of every day what you need. what I use that specifically on is I use that a bunch for underwriting to an extent. If it's a larger deal where a broker sends us an OM and it's a lot of manual data to plug in, I made a skill. So all you do is you upload the Excel file, you upload the OM, you give it a few key pieces of information that you need for your assumptions, and then it just plugs it all in. And you obviously have to go in and double check it. But it gets you 90% of the way there and saves a lot of time. And then another thing that I use Claude for a lot is a lot of templates. So if you are sending these email templates to people and you want to freshen it up, it's just, change the wording, make it seem fresh. Same with like text templates and stuff like that. So I think that's the most useful thing. Also, we use it a lot, or I use it a lot for finding rent comps. That's huge. Putting together an analysis of where the rents are going to be, where they can go, and give specific details with all the comps in one place. So that is very helpful and very useful.
Yeah, and you can I think you could probably stack those together too, where it's like you have the thorough underwriting skill, where it's like start with the rent comps, then get into the market, then get into the Excel sheet and build all that out. Yeah, I mean, that's like, you got to be doing that right now for sure if you're underwriting a high volume of deals.
Yeah.
That said, like, what I tell newer folks is that is helpful, but you also want to go through some of the reps of like actually doing it yourself, so that you understand why it's telling you certain things, right? And the actual reasoning and thought process behind these expense assumptions and these rent, like why is this rent comp better or worse, or why is it, is this going to be a nicer rent comp or a worse rent comp than what you're going to do with your units, and understanding the nuances of that, I think is pretty critical.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so as we've talked about, we do direct mail, we got email or calling, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot happening like in the, call it, cold outreach landscape, whether it's like, people are just like never picking up phone calls from numbers they don't recognize anymore. Yeah. Text is becoming like, it's not nearly as spammy as email is, but like, a lot of people are getting texts from companies they don't want to get texts from. Like I think there's a lot of challenges in that, general, just in that landscape of reaching out cold to folks, whether you're trying to buy real estate deals or whether you're a business trying to sell customers or whatever. Are you feeling that on a day-to-day basis right now? And like, where do you think we're going as an industry for folks who are trying to buy deals direct to seller? And like, do you think we're going to have to make adjustments soon? Do you think the industry is going to get a little different? Like, general thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely harder to reach people via cold call for sure. I mean, if I get a random call, I'm 9 times out of 10 not answering it. Yeah. So unless you leave me a voicemail or send me a text after that's actually meaningful and can provoke a call back, that's the only way I'm going to respond. But something that we're doing, and without revealing too much, is I think we're getting more creative with our direct mail, which we did in the past, and it's sending different types of packaging and putting little something inside the mail and doing it actually handwritten to a very targeted list of properties that are very, high value targets in our market. I think that's the best way going forward. But still, it's going to become increasingly harder and harder just with all this spam out there and people not wanting to answer. But there's, it's going to keep evolving, and I'm always looking for ways to get creative. So if anyone has any other ideas, I'm all ears. But
share the tactical stuff that we can use, selfishly speaking. But yeah, I think just in terms of like what you have to do if you're going to continue going direct to seller is prep more for the conversations that you're going to have, so you stand out more. Like better copy on your mail and on your emails. Not rely solely on one channel, and you got to realize like you got to diversify the channels. And I think like, at the end of the day, like AI will continue to like basically reduce the differences between how people reach out, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. Like so many folks are going to start using AI to just start sending outreach, and like all of that's going to like look the same. And like, sure, that may help you just get in front of more people, but your messaging is going to suck, and it's not going to be that differentiated from what everybody else is doing. So I think like, and we're spending a lot of time on this right now, as you mentioned, like focusing on differentiating your message so that everybody else is kind of doing in general the same type of thing, but like you want to be completely outside of what everybody else is doing so that you stick out and so that you seem that much more personal. Yeah. Because I think as AI like simplifies a lot of interaction for folks. Like you kind of, the true exceptional approach in terms of like differentiated copy, like really personal messaging, all of that stuff is going to be where you get your results.
Yeah.
For sure.
And we almost, I don't want to say have an unfair advantage, but when you look at us compared to this guy out of California who's just spamming a million texts to people in New Hampshire, where we're actually local, and I can point to, hey, we just bought this literally right down the street from you.
Yes.
We're real, and we're in this market. So that will still give us the advantage going forward, even with all this AI and spam going on.
100%. All right, man, this has been great. Let's wrap this up, and then we'll move over to the deal segment. But where can people reach out to you, learn more about you?
Yeah, I think the best way is probably just email. My email is acquisitions@alignedrep.com. Outside of that, you can send me a DM on Instagram. It's just Justin Dragone, RE. Pretty active on there, and I just post some acquisitions content. So yeah, just send me a DM or shoot me an email. Happy to help out anyone looking to find more deals.
Cool, man. Sounds good.